Bharat. I am the owner of this channel. You can see this is the button which one I got for my second channel. So, isn't it amazing? Obviously, I own it. So, welcome to Swapping the channel. So now onwards, I have decided that I am going to read something. I don't like to read, but content creator or what you can say shooting is my favorite hobby. I do it for whole day, so I do not get the time to read or do something else. So I have decided that I will come live and I will read this book, which may help me to become a book reader or something like that. So let's start then. So this is the book Charlie's and Maryland Tales from Shakespeare. So this is the first book which I'm going to read. So let's start then. So Charlie's Lamb. First read the introductions. I have read it this before, but I want to read it again. And I do have another book as well. So Charles Lamb, 1775 to 1834, and his elder sister Mary Lamb, 1764 to 1870, sorry 1847, were the children of confidential clerk to one of the lawyers in the Inner Temple in London. Charles grew up to join the charitable school of Christ Hospital on a scholarship where he met Coleridge as a senior student and a lifelong friendship was struck. However, Charles had to start work rather too early. He began as a clerk to a city merchant in 1789. In 1791, he joined the South Sea House, from where he moved into East Indian Company and continued three for long 33 years as a clerk, a prisoner to the desk, almost grown to wood. As he described himself, there was a streak of insanity in the family, and though Charles had only one brief stint in a mental hospital in 1791-95, all his life he lived under the shadow of a fear. Mary's case was more serious. Under a spell of madness, she had stabbed both her parents and had to stay 1 year in the lunatic asylum before her brother took charge of her, which he did not relinquish. Relinquish. I don't know this word, RELINQUISH, relinquish something, till his death. Married to appreciate the sympathy and kindness of the younger brother who remained a bachelor of her sake. Married to did not marry. Marry to did not marry. Okay. Charles was a warm hearted, amiable, and much loved person whose home the Lambs had to change their residence continuously because of the gossips that chased them regarding Mary's past, where the meeting place of Coleridge, Worthwood, Length, Hunt, Southey, and the other literary figure of the time, those unsuccessful as dramatist or poet. Though unsuccessful as dramatist or poet, Charles Lamb made his mark with his critical exploitations of English dramatists of an earlier era. Specimens of English dramatist poets who lived about the time of Shakespeare, 1808. In 2020, 1820, Lamb started writing the unforgettable essay of Elias for the London Magazine, which ensured his place for posterity as a personal essayist. Charles and Mary jointly wrote three books for children, among which were the one most well known is Tales from Shakespeare, 1807. Tales from Shakespeare by Charles Lamb and Mary Lamb retold 20 of Shakespeare's best known tragedies and comedies, which has since the date of its first publications been a delight for both the children and the adult all over the world, while offering in charming, clear prose a simplified version of the great tales of Shakespeare. The authors have it remained sensitive to the grandeur and depth of the source text, originally meant to be submitted to the young reader as an introduction to the study of Shakespeare. Tales from Shakespeare can be enjoyed both as fine introductions of the great play as well as beautiful stories in their own right. Though the writers were quite apologetic about these small and the valueless coins from the rich treasure of these faint and imperfect stamps of Shakespeare, matchless image of the book image, the book has historical value in the sense that this was the first book to retell in a nutshell the grand story of Shakespeare's play, and thus raise the common reader awareness of Shakespeare in the 18th century and afterward. The book is an intense instance of unique success in the difficult task of filtering an adult literature though through the sieve of a sensitive mind to make it fit for the children's fiesta, and it retaining much of the flavor of original. The rich feast shows that the authors did not underestimate their young reader. Either the play are so selected as to give them a taste of the best of the great master. In rewriting the play in prose, perhaps the Lambs retained some of the original speeches in order to give the readers some idea of the real Shakespeare. So this was the introductions of writers Charles and Mary Lamb, and these are the brother, sister and brother. So they wrote it, and it was one of the best book. So let's read now. Preface: the following tales meant to be submitted to the young reader as the introductions to the study of Shakespeare, for which purpose his words are used whenever it seems possible to bring them in, and in whatever has been added to give them the regular form of the connected story. Delighted Diligent care has been taken to select such words as might last interrupt the efforts of the beautiful English tongue in which he wrote. Therefore, words introduced into our language since his time have been as far as possible avoided. In those tales which have been taken from the tragedies, the young reader will perceive when they come to see the source from which these stories are driven, that Shakespeare own words with little alliterations recur very frequently in the narrative as well as in the dialogue, but in those made from the comedies, the writers found themselves scarcely, sca- scarcely even ever able to return his words into the narrative form. Therefore, in its fear that in them dialogue has been made us use of three frequently of young people not accustomed to the dramatic form of the writing, but this fault, if it be a fault, has been caused by an earnest wish to give as much of Shakespeare's own words as possible. And if the he said and she said the question and the reply. Should something seems tedious to their young years, they must pardon it, because it was the only way in which could be given to them a few hints and little foretaste of the great pleasure which awaited them in their elder year. When they came to the rich treasure from which these small and valueless coins are extracted, pretending to no other merit than a feint of the imperfect stamps of Shakespeare, matchless image, faint and imperfect image, they must be called, because the beauty of his language is too frequently destroyed by the necessity of the change of changing many of his excellent words, which words far less expressive of his true sense, to make it read something like prose. And even in some few places where his blank verse is given unaltered, unaltered as hoping from its simple plaininess, to cheat the young reader into the belief that they are reading prose, and yet still his language being transplanted from its own natural soil and wild poetic garden, it must want much of its native beauty. It has been wished to make these tales easy reading for very young children, to the utmost of their ability. The writers have constantly keep this in mind, but the subject of the most of them made this a very difficult task. It was no easy matter to give the history of men, women in terms, families of the apprehensions of a very young mind. For young ladies too, it has been the intentions safe- safely to write, because boys become being generally permitted the use of their fathers' libraries at a much earlier age than girls are. They frequently have the best sense of Shakespeare by heart before their sisters are permitted to look into these many books, mainly books, and therefore instead of recommending these tales of the per usual of young gentlemen who can read them so much better in the original. This kind assistance is rather request in explaining to their sister and such part as are hardest for them to understand, and when they have helped them to get over the difficulties, then perhaps they will read to them carefully, selecting which is proper for a young sister's ear. Some passage which has pleased them in one of these stories, in the very word of the sense from which it is taken, and it is hope they will find that the beautiful extract, the select passage they may choose to give their sisters, is in this way will be much better realized and understood from their having some notions of the great general story from the this imperfect abridgment, which if they be fortunately so done as the proof, fortunately delightful to any of the young readers, it is hoped that no worse effects will result than to make them wish themselves a little older, and they must be allowed to read the plays at full length. Such a wish will be neither peevish nor irrational. When time and leave the judicious friend shall put them into their hand, they will discover in such a theme, such of them as are here abridged, not to mention almost as many more which are left untouched. Many supering surprising event and turn of fortunes, which of their infinite variety could not be contained in this little book. Besides a world of sprinkly and cheerful characters, both men and women, the humor of which it was feared would be lost if it were attempted or reduced the length of them. What these tales shall have been to young readers, that and much more it is the writer wish that the true players of Shakespeare may prove to them in older years, enrich of the fancy strengthener of the virtue of withdrawing from all selfish and mercenary thoughts, lessons of all sweet and honorable thoughts and actions to teach courtesy, dignity, generosity, humanity. For of examples, teaching these virtues, his page are full. So now these are the content. Let's read it out. Preface: The Tempest, A Midnight Summer Night's Dream, The Winter Tale, Much Ado About Nothing, As You Like It, The Two Gentlemen of Venora, The Merchant of Venice, Clambeline, King Lear, Macbeth, All's Well That Ends Well, The Timing of the Shrew, The Comedy of Error, Measure of Measure, Twelfth Night of What You Will, Thenom of Athena, Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, Othello, Priceless Prince of Fire. So, this is what I wrote till now. Let me see how big is it. Oh, oh. So the first chapter is about 1 to 12 page. So I will check it out. Is there any comments or people are watching it or not? Because I can't see. Someone liked it, but I don't know who was that. I have to certainly none. So this was the. Should I continue or not? I don't know. Someone is watching. So read the Tempest first chapter. There was a certain island in the sea, the only inhabitant of which were an old man whose name was Prospero, Prospero and his daughter Miranda, a very beautiful young lady. She came to this island so young that she had no memory of having seen any other human face than her father's. They live in a cave or shell made out of rock. It was divided into several apartments, one of which Prospero called his study. There he kept his books, which chiefly treated of magazine, a study of at that time much affected by all learned men, and the knowledge of this art he found very useful to him, for being thrown by a stranger chance upon his island, which had been enchanted by a witch, which means the Ghost lady, something like that. Okay, which called Psychoros, who died there a short time before his arrival. Prospero, by virtue of his art, released many good spirits, and Psychorax had imprisoned in the bodies of large tree because they had refused to execute her wicked command. These gentle spirits were ever after obedient to the will of Prospero. Of these Ariel was the chief. The, the lively uh, little spirit Ariel had nothing mischievous in his nature, except that he took rather too much pleasure in tormenting an ugly monster called Caliban. For he owned he is a him a Groot because he was the son of his old enemy Skyroxus. I'm not able to pronounce it correctly. Think so. So this This Caliban Prospero found in the wood a strange, misshaped thing, far less human in form than a ape. He took him home to his shell and taught him to speak taught him to speak, and Prospero would have been very kind to him, but the bad nature which Caliban inherited from his mother Scarax would not let him learn anything good or useful. Therefore, he was employed like a slave to fetch wood and do the most laborious office, and arrival had the charge of compelling him to this service. When Caliban was lazy and neglected his work, arrival, who was invisible to all eyes but prosperous, would come slyly, and pinch him, and something tremble him down the mire, and the arrival in the likeness of an ape would make mouth at him, thus swiftly changing his shape in the likeness of a hedgehog. Hedgehog? Hedgehog. Hedgehog. He would lie trembling in Caliban's way, who feared the headlock's sharp quill would prick his bare feet with a variety of such like virtuous trick. A rival would often torment him. Whenever Caliban neglected the work which Prospero commanded him to do, having this powerful spirit obedient to his will, Prospero could by their means command the wind and the waves of the sea. By his order, they raised the violent storm in the midst of minds of which, and struggling with the wild sea waves that every moment pretended to swallow it up. He showed his daughter a fine large ship, which he told her was full of living being like themselves. "Oh, my dear father," said she, "if by your art you have raised this dread, dreadful storm, have pity on their and sad distress. See, the vessels will be dashed to pieces. Poor soul, they will all perish if I had power. I will sink the sea beneath to earth rather than the good ship would be destroyed for with the with all the precious soul within her. Be not amazed, daughter Marinda, said Prospero. There is no harm done. I have I have so ordered it that no person in the ship shall receive any hurt. What I have done has been in care of you. My dear child, you are in ignorant. Who are you? Who are you or where you came from? And you know no more of me. But I am your father and live in peace. I live in this poor cave. Can you remember a time where before you come to this cell? I think you cannot. For you were not then 3 years of age. By what? Asking Prospero. By any other house or person. Tell me what you can remember, my child. Melinda said, it seems to me like the recollecting of a dream, but had I not once 4 or 5, had I not who attended upon me? Attend. Porphyrio answered, you had no more. You had and more. How is it that this still live in your mind? Do you remember how you came here? No, sir, said Marinda. I remember nothing more. 12 years ago, Marinda continues Porphyrio. I was Duke of Milan, and you were a princess, and my only heir. I had a young brother whose name was Antonio, to whom I trusted everything. And as I was fond of retirement and deep study, I commonly left the management of my state affair to a young uncle, my false brother. For so indeed he proved. I, neglecting all worldly ends, buried among my books, did dedicated whole time to the bettering of my mind, my brother Antonio being thus in possessions of my power, being to think himself the duck indeed. The opportunity I gave him of making himself popular among my subjects affect in his bad nature, a proud, ambitious ambition to deprive uh, me of my dukedom. This he soon affected with aid of the king of Naples, a powerful princess who was my enemy. Wherefore, said Marinda, did they not that our history us? Did they not that our destroyed us? My child answered her father, they durst not. So there was the love that my people bore me. Antonio carried us on board a ship, and when he were some leagues out at sea, he forced us into a small boat without either tackle, sail, or mast. There he left us, as he thought, a Paris, but a kind lord of my court, one Gonzalo, who loved me, had privately placed in the boat water provisions, a fuel, and some books which I prize above my dukedom. Oh, my father, said Marinda, what a trouble must I have been to you then. No, my love, said Prospero. You were a little cherub that did preserve me. Your innocent smiles made me bear up against my misfortune. Our food listed till we landed on this desert Iceland. Since when my chief delights has been in teaching you. Mariana, the hand will and will have you profited by my instructions. Heaven thank you, my dear father, said Marinda. Now pray tell me, sir, your reason for raising this sea storm. Know then, said her father, that by meaning of this stone my enemy is the king of Nealphys, and my cruel brother are cast ashore upon this island. Having so said, Prospero gently touches his daughter with his magic wand, and she fall fast asleep. For the spirit and real just then presented himself before the master to give an account of the tempest and how he had disposed of the ship's company, and thought the spirit were always invisible to Marina. Prospero did not choose she should hear him holding converse as would seem to hear with the empty air. Well, my bravo spirit, said Prospero to how have you performed your task? Arrival gave her likely dis- descriptions of the storm uh, and of the terror of the mariner, and how the king's son Ferdinand was the first who had leaped into the sea, and his father thought he saw his dear son swallowed up by the waves and lost. But he is safe, said Mariel, in a corner of the cell, sitting with his arms folding, sadly lamenting the loss of the king, his father, whom he concludes drowned, not a hair of his head in injured, and his princely garments, though drenched in the sea waves, later fresher than before. That's my delicate Ariel, said Prospero. Bring him hither. My daughter must see this young prince. Where is the king? And young, I have left the answer. I did the dedicated said, bring him hither. My daughter must see the young princess. Where is the king and my brother? I left them, answered Ariel, searching for Ferdinand, whom they have little hope to find. Thinking they saw him perish of the ship's crew, not one is missing, though each one thinks himself one the only one saved, and the ship thought invisible to them in a safe harbor. Oh my goodness, I'm being sleepy. Can you see my mind is saying it's enough and sleep now, but I don't want to sleep. I have an exam in next month. I do have a German exam. Let me check it again. Is it working properly or not? Obviously, no one would see. So it's been 32 minutes. Someone now it's time to say goodbye. So bye bye. I want to end this.